Welcome to today's episode of the Children First Family Law podcast. I'm really happy today to have a former client of mine who is not coming on via video just to keep some anonymity, but his name is Mike, and we are going to talk today about his journey from marriage to divorce with a very, very young child, and his journey also in sobriety, having had a lot of challenges initially in the marriage and having to really prove that he was going to be able to be safe for his child and a safe co-parent in order to be able to have parenting time with his young daughter. So welcome, Mike. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for agreeing to share your story with people today.
Absolutely, Krista. Thanks for having me. And it's cool to be in a spot where things have improved significantly to where I feel like I can talk about it pretty openly now. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, I really appreciate it because there's a lot of, I think, shame and embarrassment around divorce generally, but also when you have had challenges and you've turned a corner, a lot of people aren't really willing to share that. And I think your story will just be really instructive to tell a lot of people that there is room for change and hope. And I think that you're really just a great example of that. So thanks for being willing to share. And I guess they say that our suffering is not for naught. And you and your wife did go through suffering, and your daughter too. So I'm hoping that really this will give some hope both to the parent who maybe doesn't have the sobriety problems to the same level as their co-parent, but also to the parent who is going through those things. I think you and your story is an example of both. So let's go back to maybe before I actually entered your case. Let's go back to maybe the beginning story of you and your wife. You met in college, is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Tell
Without,
me a little about that. So I understand you were at a Christian college and you're a college athlete. When did you meet? How far into college were you when you started being a couple?
just to go back a little further, my story with addiction kind of started early on in my life in high school, and then continued on to my freshman year of college was an effort for me to like kind of escape that lifestyle. So I'd been participating in the drugs and alcohol as a freshman in college, and that, as we'll talk about later, my attempt to like move states and go to a Christian school was kind of an effort to get away from some of that. So yeah, which was my sophomore, junior, and senior year, and got married just a couple months after I graduated in 2015.
So did you have at this point multiple sort of, you hear people talk about like rock bottoms. Like were you having that? Were you having what you consider to be rock bottoms, or what finally was getting your attention? And I guess I wonder if it was like a roller coaster, or if we hear a lot about people needing multiple attempts at sobriety sometimes, right? And so were you having that? Were there periods where you would hit a low and stop for a while and then start again? Or what was happening at that point?
Yeah, so earlier on, I would have those like lows, and I would say I gotta stop, and I would maybe go like a week where I would be like, okay, I'm gonna stay sober for a week, and the justifications in addiction are just unbelievable. I would be like, if I can go a week, then I've proved to myself that I don't actually have a problem, because people that have a problem can't go a week. And and then as like a celebration for going a week, I would use again because I proved to myself that I had control over it. And that's like an obsession that they teach you about in Alcoholics Anonymous, that everyone with addiction has the obsession to control and manage their use. And if you feel like you're in control of it, then you've convinced yourself it's not a problem. So earlier on, I had more of an ability to do those types of things where I would like, I'm gonna go to dinner and I'm gonna prove to myself that I can just have 2 beers. And if I do that, then I'm okay. I had more of an ability to like have those stretches of sobriety just by like white knuckling it early on. And then later on, it just progressed, and it really was like daily use for everything. And me convincing myself that it wasn't a problem revolved around getting some type of positive affirmation from someone. So there's still a ton of secrecy going on. Like
Mhm.
if I could get my boss to say, "Oh, you did a good job with that project," or if I could leave a situation where I knew that I was under the influence of multiple substances and I didn't feel like the person knew, then I would be like, "Okay, it's not that big of a deal." So see, it's super common in addiction. A lot of people don't realize it, but when someone thinks of an addict, they think of someone that's like belligerent. It's so obvious that they're under the influence all the time, and that is the case for some people. But there's also a lot of people that seem like they're functioning, but they really have a serious problem with addiction, and that was the camp that I fell in. Is I had to keep it a secret and was very very concerned about people finding out, if that makes sense. So
So you came out during the IOP then. Did you then have to start to come clean to your ex, your now ex? Is that why, like, things started going south again, or what happened that made the marriage not survive this, you think?
yeah, so we started counseling immediately after I got out of rehab, and I had been, telling people in rehab like that. I don't know if I have the courage to tell her. It's going to destroy her. I need help. I'm terrified, and then had actually different responses. Like some people surprisingly were like, if you never go back to it, you don't have to tell her, but that was never gonna work for me, like, carrying that, and she deserved to know. So I had some really good people that told me, like, she deserves to know the truth. And so I told our marriage counselor early when we started going, and she said the same thing. She was like, "You have to tell her, like, she deserves to know, and she deserves to have all the information." And so that happened in one of our marriage counseling sessions, and understandably she immediately asked me to move out.
What hope or advice would you give to somebody who would have been in your ex-wife's shoes, right? Of how to get back into it, how to move forward through this whole thing and be able to try to, like, build trust with somebody who is actually demonstrating sobriety.
Yeah, advice that I would give is get open and honest early. Don't mess around when it comes to addictive behaviors and unhealthy coping mechanisms with stress, and then even with things like trauma or fear, anxiety, like those types of things. You just get open and honest earlier than I did, and I wish that I would have opened up about much more, much earlier, because people are there to help and love on you, and there's forgiveness, and keeping stuff inside and trying to deal with it yourself is just a recipe for a really unhappy and unhealthy life. So that's the advice that I would give. And then on the other side, for someone like in my ex spouse's position, that's a really tough one, because we got married really young. We were immature in a lot of ways. There were unhealthy dynamics in our relationship, probably red flags that I think were not good indicators for the health of the relationship going into the marriage. And so there's an element of, again, of bringing other healthy people into the mix, being open and honest, bringing people that you trust into the mix as far as like mentorship and counseling and premarital counseling, all that stuff I would recommend before jumping into a marriage. And then later on, like for someone in my spouse's position, I guess, goodness, it's hard to like put anything on her because a lot of this was not her fault, but there is a lot of, I think, education around addiction that if you choose to participate in learning about it, there can be some healing, and it can make it a little less personal, I think.
Mm.
So to the extent that someone's able and willing to kind of go on that journey of understanding what addiction is and what it does to people, it can also help that person not feel as much of the pain and the anger, I guess.